Our community, our hometown. This is Kearney Live, presented by 102.7 FM and KMO-TV. Kearney Live is a close-up look at the people, places, and events that matter to you. And now, here are the hosts of Kearney Live, Mike Davis and Jim Dickerson.
And good afternoon and welcome to Kearney Live. For those of you who are expecting to see Mike Davis, I understand your disappointment. Normally it's me that's gone, but today Mike is, how we say in the business, on assignment. He's out, and so I will be filling in. Now, before you turn off your TV, radio, or whatever you're listening to us or watching us on, today's guest is, we'll get to here in just a minute, but this is really different. And we've been talking a little bit before the show started, and this is something else. But Gary Staab is with us, and I'm pretty excited about it, too. He's a paleo-artist. Am I saying that right?
That's correct.
And so for everybody who's going, what is that? Well, we're going to tell you here in just a minute, but I think you're going to be impressed, and I think you're going to like it. And the big thing is it's local, and I didn't even know it. Of course, I don't know many things. Getting to some other stuff in news, we were talking just before the show started, too, what's coming up. I do know, and I'm sadly going to be out of town for this because I've got to go do that air show we always do up in Wisconsin. Yep. But Shooting Star is going to be at the amphitheater on the
23rd?
23rd. So that is one concert that I wanted to see, and they are in concert with Missouri, and that'll be a pretty good show out there. Yep. So if you don't have tickets for that, make sure you get that. Shooting Star, haven't seen them since the 70s.
Wow.
Thought I'd date myself just a little bit. So got that to look forward to. In the news, there is something the Clay County Sheriff's Department has been really asking us to talk quite a bit about because it's really becoming a problem, this fentanyl problem. I think everybody's heard about it. There's been a number of drug overdoses and that sort of thing. And that problem, the problem is, and the sheriff has talked to us a lot about it, is people are getting these drugs and they don't realize what they are. So they think they're something else, and then they find out they're laced with fentanyl. And the impact of it is very quick. I mean, we're talking hours, and you've got to get medical help immediately or it's over. And a lot of people are suffering through that. There's a new thing going around. At first, I didn't believe it. I thought it was one of those urban legends. We did some checking, and it come to find out it is true. So we're trying to let everybody know there is either a person or persons. The cases that I've heard of so far are in Kentucky and Tennessee, and there was one more, but I forget where it was, but it's kind of centralized to that. But basically what they're doing is they're putting money on the ground, and then you pick the money up, and the money is laced with fentanyl. It's happened to a couple of people now, and then it gets into your system really, really quick. The telltale on this one was that the bills they picked up were folded. They were folded up. So it's not like a random bill sitting on the ground because, you know, if you see money on the ground, especially now, who doesn't want to pick it up? I know Brian would, right?
Yep, that's right.
Just making sure he was paying attention.
I was paying attention.
So anyway, there's some crazy folks out there, but just if you're out there bebopping around and you see a folded bill on the ground, I'd be real careful about picking stuff up, especially now. I'm sure the Sheriff's Department and some other come out with some stuff here before long as if this fentanyl thing is out of control. I know they have the one pill, I'm going to mess it up, one pill can kill. Is that what it is?
Something like that,
Something like that.
Very close.
They were doing seminars and informational programs. Those are really good. I've heard great reviews about them, especially for those of you who have kids that are in junior high and high school. So that is all I have on that. It's going to get hot again. That's all I have to say about that. Brian, have I left anything out?
Nope, I think that's it.
You don't want to talk about anything?
I don't have anything, no.
Do you want to talk about Mike?
Mike? No.
Okay. let's get right
Mike,
to
we
the
miss you.
Mike, hope you come back soon because sure could use the ratings here. Can you imagine you go through your day and you think you're going to see Mike Davis on
Kearney Live, yeah.
and then you turn it on and
It's
me.
Jim.
I understand. As I said before, and it still holds true, it's like going to expecting to see Johnny Carson and you turn it on and it's Joan Rivers. I understand the disappointment.
Yep.
Gary Staab, welcome to the program. Now, Gary, I was originally going to introduce you and then talk about what you do, and I started to figure out how I was going to explain it and realized I couldn't do it. So I'm just going to let you explain it. Why don't you tell the people what you do? Because it is so unique and interesting. I got to be honest, I've never heard of this before. And then the stuff you do is I think it's outstanding.
Oh, thank you. So I'm an artist, first and foremost, and I work with scientists. And my job is to make extinct animals for museum exhibits. So that includes making sculptures of dinosaurs. And so if you've ever walked through a natural history museum or been to a museum exhibit and you've seen the animals that are there, that's my job, is to make those as believable as possible, given the current science that's available. So I look at bones very, very closely, study those skeletons, compare them against living animals, and then add the muscles and then the skin over that to create the final sculpture.
And we're not talking little sculptures here.
No.
We're talking, these things are big.
Yeah, these are some of the biggest sculptures that have ever been made. So the Brachiosaurus that we did for the Children's Museum, I believe, is one of the top 5 largest sculptures ever made.
And when we say large,
So 75 feet long and 53 feet tall. And then we also completed 2 years ago a 52-foot long megalodon. But it's like a greyhound bust with teeth. I mean, it's that big, and that's hanging up in the Smithsonian now at the National Museum of Natural History.
and so the funny thing is the detail on some of these things is so
Yeah.
precise. I mean, it is really good.
Yeah, we're trying to give visitors a really unique experience, and we're trying to make them, time. It's the only way we can time travel, really, is to have artists look back in time. We don't have the machine that will do it, so we rely constantly on artists to give us images of the past, and that's held true for as long as artists have been around, and as long as we've been thinking about the past. Artists are always the people who create our view of the past.
Okay, so if you're watching the monitor now, okay, so
Okay.
we have to give this disclaimer every time. If you're watching on KMO-TV, we're going to use some of the images on the monitor. If you're listening on the radio, please do not look at your radio because you're going to wreck your car and you can't see it. What you can do is go back later and look at the podcast or the replay or whatever. We have it on all the KMO-TV and the website, 1027carneymo.com and all that. For those of you watching on Facebook Live, our restream, or wherever, let's go to the monitor. I have some questions. Okay. So go back to the one, Brian, if you could, the one before that. There. Can you, okay. Talk to me about what that is.
Right.
I know because I'm kind of geeky, but what that is. And then how do you, so if you have the bone structure,
Mm-hmm.
how do you know how to come up with that? And I'm talking textures, colors,
Sure,
all that stuff.
Sure. Well, it starts, I have a background in taxidermy, so I've been on the inside of a lot of animals looking at anatomy. So I still continue to do dissection work all the time. And all of the muscle choices that you see on a sculpture like that are based on work that I've done dissecting animals to look at those anatomical similarities. And so this is, we look at modern birds for dinosaurs like this. This is a kind of tyrannosaur. So we look at birds in particular, like ostriches and things like that. So you can use that musculature to help piece together that puzzle and get the shapes that. Now, textures, there are actually fossil skin textures, believe it or not, of about 5 or 6 different kinds of dinosaurs. So we can look at those skin preserved scales and use that. I literally can take peels, like a rubber peel, off of the surface of a dinosaur's fossil skin and then clean it up and use that to impress onto the clay sculpture. So I'm actually using the texture of that dinosaur on the skin. We don't have it for all of the dinosaurs.
Right.
But just some.
So it's like movie making then when they make the rubber, monster masks and those type of things. They invert it and then they pour the mold. And is that kind of what you do, Gary?
Yeah, it's a lot of mold making and casting, and that's a really difficult thing to talk about because it involves negatives and positives. And so, but it's essentially you have to make we'll use the bone structure, a fossil, preferably if you can sculpt over a replica of the fossil, and then sculpt the muscles over it, then the skin over that, make a mold of that, make a cast of that, and then you finish it with all the final details and color.
Okay, so let's go back. What the image before that?
Okay.
Not me. I'm not a dinosaur yet.
You want
the one before that?
The one with just the head?
Yeah.
Okay.
So tell us again what that is.
So that is called Lithrinax, and that's a really newly discovered dinosaur that was just scientifically described about 7 years ago. And it has scientists. I always have this criticism because scientists tend to the names they choose can be really difficult or not very interesting. And this one, I think, kind of bucks that trend because it's called Lithrinax, which is not that easy to remember, but it's Lithrinax argestes, and it means the king of gore. So it's a meat-eating dinosaur, and so
the king
of gore.
Of gore.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can tell by the teeth.
The teeth. Yeah. Yeah.
So what you're saying is, while this thing is dining for lunch, it's probably not.
It's not a plant.
You don't want to invite him over for a barbecue. I'm saying, or her. Right. Okay, go to the next one, Brian. The one that you had.
Okay.
There we go. So that looks a little more familiar. Mm-hmm. What is that?
That's Pachyrhinosaurus.
Good. Okay. Excellent. Tell me some more.
Yeah, sure. So the neat thing about this particular dinosaur is it's found up in Canada, and it's got this weird stump of a nasal structure on the top of its head. It looks like someone chainsawed off a tree on the top of his nose. But they've found many of these pachyrhinosaurs in a mass death event trying to cross a river. And so their bones are all tumbled together, and it's not just like a weird structure on one animal. It's a structure that's specific to that species. Yeah,
he looks like he's got a parrot beak.
Yeah, parrot
there.
beak. So,
and where is that?
That one is currently on display in Oregon, and it's traveling. It's traveled all over the United States. In fact, a lot of the sculptures that I make are either in traveling exhibits or in permanent exhibits, and that not just in North America, but all over.
And so we talked a little bit about this before off the air, but you mentioned you did taxidermy and that sort of thing, but at what point did you wake up and go, well, I have an idea. I want to do this? Because most people, when you take your little aptitude test in high school, this isn't on the list.
It's usually not an occupational choice. Yeah.
Well, you created your own occupation, though.
So
Tell us about that.
How'd you get into that?
Yeah, so I went into college completely undecided. I did have an interest in taxidermy, so I thought, well, maybe I can kind of roll that into a business eventually. My parents were very supportive of that. And then I took my first drawing class in college, and we went to a Natural History Museum in Hastings, Nebraska. And that museum, had these beautiful dioramas. And I thought, well, gosh, somebody has to build these exhibits. That'd be an amazing job to work on. So I walked around the corner right after that drawing class and asked one of the museum staff if I could, do a directed study or an internship. And of course, they had a total staff at that museum of like 5 people, so they were excited to have the free labor. And so they put me immediately to work designing an exhibit. I designed and built an exhibit in my directed study. It was a small exhibit, but it took me through the whole process of the conception of the writing, the execution of all the things, and then building everything inside that exhibit. So that was it for me. I was like, this is endlessly fascinating. And the subject change. We don't ever do the same thing twice, which is a curse. Sometimes
it doesn't get boring either, because
No,
you're
it
like,
doesn't.
oh, now I got to do this thing again.
Yeah, no, we don't ever do a lot of. We do repetition inside. Like I've made millions of scales on these animals. I literally have made millions of scales. But so that can be very tedious. But the subject is always different. So that's a really cool part of it.
And then after you were in Hastings, you went to overseas, didn't you?
I did. First I did a directed study at the Smithsonian, at the Office of Exhibit Central, and then I got an internship at the British Museum of Natural History in London. And those folks were just absurdly good at doing sculpture and model making, and so I learned a ton, and then was immediately employed after that at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, where I worked for 7 years on staff, and I've been freelance for almost 25 years now.
And so how do people know? I have trouble picturing someone going, okay, we need someone to build a dinosaur. Who do we have? I mean, but I assume by now everybody knows you're kind of a go-to resource.
I have a lot of repeat customers, so I do a lot of work for National Geographic, and that work specifically is working on mummies. So I've been able to travel all over the world to see mummies in person. If they want to make a highly detailed, accurate replica of a mummy, say Tutankhamun, for instance, they call me up. I get the medical data from the scans, and then we send that to a printer to kind of rough out the full form of it. And then I go over to Egypt, go down into the tomb, take measurements off of the mummy, and then take that information and photographs that I've gained from that visit, which was absolutely mind-blowing, and then use that to inform the sculpture.
Wow.
I have no words.
I know, yeah. Fascinating.
Because I wanted to get into that, to your visit with that in the second segment, which we'll get to in a minute. And I'll tell you what, I don't want to, because I know we're coming up on the break, and I don't want to get too far into this because I have only 3,247 questions left to go. But I tell you what, let's take a short break, and then we'll come back. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the pyramids, what's inside, and maybe who's gone inside. We'll talk about that a little bit less here in a few minutes. You're listening or watching Kearney Live. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Say thank you to these local underwriters who support KPGZ.
Simplify your banking, simplify your life. It's easy with Kearney Trust Company. Kearney Trust goes beyond convenient locations and good customer care to offer banking services that make managing your finances quicker and easier than ever before. Online, bill pay, e-statements, and mobile banking are available to give you a positive banking experience so you can get back to your life and activities. Kearney Trust also provides capital to people and businesses so they can achieve their goals. Whether you know exactly what you want or just need someone to talk to about your dream, you can speak with them and work on that dream. Kearney Trust Company is your partner for success with 2 convenient locations in Kearney at 310 West 92 Highway and 701 Watson Drive in Price Chopper. The phone is 816-628-6666. Kearney Trust Company. Banking you can trust. Member FDIC.
Electric cooperatives are different. We have a sense of pride in our local community and support the people who live here. That's why Platte Clay Electric Cooperative supports local schools, takes an active role in economic development, and works hard to keep costs down for its members. We exist for one purpose, to empower communities and energize life with safe and reliable energy. To learn more about how Platte Clay Electric Cooperative is working to achieve that mission, visit www.pcec.coop. Platte Clay Electric Cooperative.
You may have noticed your shoulder hurting, or maybe a kink in your neck. The culprit may be looking right at you. Your phone. Think about how you use it. Does that pain feel familiar to you?
Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Strathman with Kearney Family Chiropractic Center, and I've been practicing chiropractic health in Kearney for over 22 years. When you come to see me, I identify what's wrong and determine if I can help you. If I can, I create your personalized plan for relief.
When you have pain, you can make an appointment by calling 816-628-6738, or you can visit the office at 301 South Platte Clay Way, Suite B in Kearney. Kearney Family Chiropractic Center. Heal yourself.
And welcome back to Kearney Live. We are visiting with Gary Staab, who is a paleo-artist. Very interesting thing. For those of you tuning in who wanted to see Mike Davis, we covered this a little bit before, but we have been getting all sorts of emails and texts and everything else. And the question is, will Mike be back? And the answer is yes. He'll be back probably next week. And I get it. I understand. You want to see Mike. Much better looking specimen than myself. Anyway, going back, Gary, so you have traveled quite a bit in doing this little endeavor, and I think a lot of people have heard of, I guess, commonly called the Iceman.
Mm-hmm.
You have some knowledge of the Iceman, not like you knew him or anything like that, but talk to us a little bit about the Iceman.
Yeah, that was a really cool project because, no pun intended, but I was commissioned by the Cold Spring Harbor Genetics Lab in Long Island, New York, to make a replica that was so accurate that you could study it of the Iceman. An Iceman's a 5,300-year-old anatomically modern human, so found in the Alps in Italy. And he just has just an incredible array of artifacts that he was found with, that he had with him. And we're just learning a ton as our tools get better and better to evaluate, more powerful to evaluate these artifacts. We're just finding out more and more about it. So they asked me to make this replica. And so there was CT data for it, medical scans. So we took that CT data, sent it to a company in Belgium that started a three-dimensional print of it at full scale. And then I went over to Italy and got to go into the freezer with the Iceman and actually get, right up close and examine the mummy right there in the freezer.
Is that this picture on the monitor? Can you see?
Yeah.
Is that the, okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's the replica.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then just to add to the complexity of that trip, as you might imagine, working with national treasures, as I am privileged to do sometimes, is pretty extraordinary. But sometimes, say if you're working with Tutankhamun or you're working with the Iceman, and these are irreplaceable objects, so you have to go into them. And I'm trained as an artifact handler, so I've been able to, I know how to handle things so I don't break them. But one of the neat experiences from that Iceman trip was being asked by one of the archaeologists if I wanted to actually touch the Iceman. So, because he thought it was really important for me as a connection as an artist to be able to, you know, put my hands on the person so that I could, you know, have that relatability when I'm making this replica.
So in the image we saw there, which I realize is the replica, but the real Iceman, is the skin kind of intact still?
Mm-hmm.
To a degree?
Yeah, so the skin, we have basically two levels of skin. So our epidermis, epi means top, so the top layer of his skin is gone, but the dermis still remains. And then at one point he was scavenged by animals, so his hip is kind of ripped open. And then parts of him were broken. When they chunked him out, they thought he was just a modern hiker who had lost his way when two hikers found him. And so they chipped him out with an ice axe, but they broke some limbs and kind of damaged his side as well when they recovered him. But it's a really extraordinary find, and it just keeps getting more and more interesting.
So the two guys that found him, what were they looking for somebody, or
no? They were just up there hiking, and one of the most exciting parts of this whole story is that he was murdered, and we know this because he was shot. There's a shot in the back by an arrow, and the arrowhead remains underneath his shoulder blade.
Wow!
So whoever shot him tugged that arrow out and left, and the flint head stayed in him, and that's what killed him.
And when you talk about some of the artifacts that were found with him, what all was around him? Because I think that's fascinating, because you get to see the tools of the time. Exactly. You know, what did he have 5,000 years ago?
Yeah. And so this is a person who's 5'3" tall, and we know because of his genetic print that he had a propensity for heart disease. We know he had Lyme disease. We know you can just genetically go through, just because he's so well preserved, you can pick up all that stuff. But the artifacts are really important. One of the coolest things that he was found with was a copper axe, and copper, it kind of reset our understanding of when copper was worked, just by doing they do this thing called mass spectrometry, which tells you in short, tells you what the metal was, what kind of metal it was, and how it might have been used. So I was so fascinated by this axe that he had with him that I made one myself, just to see if I could do it and then use it. And then I chopped a small tree down with it to see how it worked, because I wanted to. It has such a weird angle to it. I thought, God, I could just try. You know, they call this experimental archaeology. When you do that, you build the artifacts and then test them to see if they work. And so I did that with.
Did it work?
Yeah, it was great. It's very sharp.
So one of the things that's fascinated me with, and I don't know if you have any input on this or not, but one of the things that's fascinated me is you take someone like that. So we're talking 5,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then you go forward. Let's go back, or let's move forward 4,000 years.
Right.
The amount of technology advancement in that 4,000 years was minimal. I mean, if you found a guy that was 1,000 years old in the ice, the differences would be minimal. But you take technology, let's say from 1910, well, let's do 1900 to today. So we're talking 120 years ish. The advancement in technology is 50,000 times quicker than that.
Yeah.
Why all of a sudden, did the aliens come visit and give us a little blueprint and say, here, this will help you along, or what happened?
A lot of it's a very interesting subject, because you go from at this, so anatomically modern humans are about 200,000 years old when as we recognize what we look like as humans. We're either hunting or being hunted during the Ice Age as humans, right? So we're either trying to eat stuff or it's trying to eat us.
Which is, with animals in the wild,
sure, that's just part of the food chain, right?
You're right.
So and then as you move through technologies, then you get to a point where it switches, and you have this exactly what you're talking about, where we get the technology, it pushes it beyond where we are hunted anymore, and so this changes the whole dichotomy. It also, one of the other things that happened too is agrarian stuff. So agriculture was a really big switch for us when we started to not move and start to produce crops, and that was a big technology switch as well.
And was there a point, I would assume there became a point where we were, during the hunting and hunted period, we were probably moving around quite a bit, where you didn't establish a home per se, or a village or whatever.
Right.
Is there a point where you can see where that started to happen? Like, okay, now we started to realize this is a good area to grow crops. This is a good area to hunt. If we establish a base camp, for lack of better words, now we're not moving all our stuff around. We can come put all our stuff here.
Yeah, one of the challenges of trying to record things like that, especially in nomadic cultures, is that history gets erased pretty easily, and so you can certainly find evidence for it, but because they're following herds, it's a high energy environment, right? So there's a lot of things going on. That stuff gets lost pretty easily until you start building structures, more permanent structures than that can be preserved or scanned and seen from satellites, all that LiDAR, things like that help us find those kind of sites. Yep.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So going back 5,000 years when the Iceman was there, what all kind of what environment would he have been in at that time? It's not like his village was just down the hill.
Right. So his story,
is he kind of like on his own?
He was traveling over the top of a mountain pass. Obviously, so he had some conflict with somebody who chased him down and shot him in the back. But the things that he carried with him were basically what you would have. This is like the highest technology of the time. So he had a frame pack on. He had all of these little different kinds of medicinal things with him. These things called birchwood. They're kind of a lichen, and it's like a leather strop. It's like literally a thing you use to sharpen
like
his
a
axe.
Knife.
Yeah.
Right.
So he had a flint knife as well.
And what was his frame pack made out of?
It was made out of yew wood.
Okay.
Yeah. And he had a bow, but it was unfinished. Wasn't strung or completely finished, and he had arrows as well. And a little kit, had a fire starter kit, all that stuff with him.
So we had discovered fire.
Oh yeah, fire goes way back.
And what was the elevation that he was at that point?
I think it's around 11,000. I always forget this. So
because I find that interesting too, because back then you wouldn't. I'm thinking you wouldn't have known the impact of elevation on your ability to breathe and that sort of thing. However, who knows? Back then, maybe they were acclimated to that. They spent more time up there, and that's just, to them, that was normal. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, he's probably in super good shape, basically, if he's traveling up and down the mountains all the time.
And I find it really interesting that he was shot in the back by someone else.
Right.
So
it's the perfect story, really.
Yeah, whatever the conflict was.
It makes it a really durable story because it's the perfect science story in that we can't answer all the questions, and it's a murder mystery essentially. Right. But it has so much cool content. There's all the genetic stuff and all the artifact stuff. It makes it a really fun thing.
And what would he up there? What would he survive on? What would he eat?
So they have DNA'd his stomach contents. So they know exactly what he ate for his last meal. So he had there was a kind of grain which is very similar to a wheat there, and then he had ibex, so kind of goat. He had goat meat and some wheat.
Interesting. Well, he had to be carrying that with him because You're not going to find that up there.
Yeah, he probably had it in his pack or ate it before he left.
As part of the murder mystery, it's possible that he was killed for his food.
This is the great thing about this find, is that it's so open for speculation. You can, in fact, every time I give a talk about the Iceman, I have somebody come up to me. I know exactly what happened, which is really fun because we really don't know.
Right,
we don't know.
I think it was a robbery homicide. Not the first case either.
Nope.
Yeah.
So I had a question about that, and I completely forgot what it was. So as we look at that, it's really nice because it was preserved because of the atmospheric conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think about? So that was 5,000 years ago, and in our historic teachings and our history books and all that, we've always been told, in our land here, there's and people have found them, so we know it's the arrowheads and Indian burial grounds, and I'm sure there's Civil War burial, but we're only talking a couple hundred years, and over a span of 100 years or so. What is the possibility, because the atmosphere is different, that under the ground, which is completely gone now, but there was just all sorts of stuff like that we
right.
I assume, well, I don't know. I was going to say if you went deep enough, you might find something, but I doubt it because the organics of it would destroy it.
Yeah. So a geologist once gave me this great explanation of the world. It's like you can talk about any place that you stand on the world in one of two ways. It's either, it's super, we're going to get nerdy for just a moment. So it's erosional or depositional. And so either the place you're standing, like on the top of a mountain, is going to erode away, and then down in that valley where all that sediment gets washed down is depositional. So every single place that you stand or swim or wherever you're at in the world can be described that way.
So I don't want to get into a big debate, as it were, but it is an interesting look at. I think a lot of times when you hear people talk about, climate change and all this, they're looking at a window that's about this big. And the reality is that the window of what the Earth has gone through is like from our studio here clear over to probably Hastings, Nebraska and farther, probably longer than that, because it's just gone through so much.
Right.
And even the pyramids, so you can see that's kind of neat because you can see the effects of erosion on the pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
But in the big scheme of things, that's not that long ago.
No, it's not. It's just a blip in time.
So
it really is.
Yeah.
We talk about deep time a lot, and how trying to understand a million years is almost impossible.
Right.
And then you think about some of the animals that I've worked on are 200 million years old. So you work with the information that you have, and then you couple that together to do the best you can with the restoration of the past.
200 million years.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at the average lifespan of a human is 72, or is it 77 now or something like that? Well, it's not a million. We'll talk a little bit about it. And let's go into King Tut's tomb when we come back. You're watching Kearney Live. Stay with us.
Always remember to thank the underwriters for their support of KPGZ.
You value choices when it comes to the products and services you bring into your home. That's why Platte Clay Electric Cooperative gives you control over the energy you use. PCEC offers members ways to save with energy efficiency rebates and demand billing. You even have the power to choose the resources used to produce your power. To learn more, visit www.pcec.coop/power. Platte Clay Electric Cooperative. Your power, your way.
Migraine headaches, the throbbing in your temples, the pounding in your forehead, extreme sensitivity to light and sound. Your neck feels so tight it could snap off. Oh, the debilitating pain.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Strathman with Kearney Family Chiropractic Center, and I've been practicing chiropractic health in Kearney for over 22 years. When you come to see me, I identify what's wrong and determine if I can help you. If I can, I create your personalized plan for relief.
When you have pain, you can make an appointment by calling 816-628-6738, or you can visit the office at 301 South Platte Clay Way, Suite B in Kearney. Kearney Family Chiropractic Center. Heal yourself.
Online banking at Kearney Trust Company gives you 24/7 access to your checking, savings, money markets, CDs, and loan accounts. You can access your accounts anytime from your home, office, and mobile devices. Online banking with Kearney Trust combines convenience and flexibility to bank on your own terms. Kearney Trust Company is a partner for success with 2 locations in Kearney at 310 West 92 Highway and 701 Watson Drive in Price Chopper. The phone is 816-628-6666. Kearney Trust Company. Banking you can trust. Member FDIC.
And welcome back to Kearney Live. We're talking live with Gary Staab, who's a paleo-artist, and giving us some insight into history, and not like history that you read in a history book or talking about the Civil War or something that happened in the amount of time, in the span of time of the world not that long ago. I know, Gary, that you spent some time, we talked about the pyramids. Mm-hmm. You've actually been in one.
Well, I wasn't in a pyramid. I was in the Valley of the Kings, which is where the majority of the significant Egyptian royalty are buried.
And where is the Valley of the Kings?
In Alexandria.
Okay.
Luxor, Alexandria area.
And so you were there to do what?
So my job was to recreate an exact copy of the mummy of Tutankhamun. And so National Geographic had asked me to create this replica because the real mummy can't travel because it's too fragile. But they wanted to have, because it's so different from our vision of what when you think of Tutankhamun, you think of King Tut. What do you think of? You think of that gold mask,
right?
That beautiful, beautiful thing. But it was really, he was just a young man, really. And there's so much, just like the Iceman, there's so much conjecture about how he died. But the short story is they wanted me to recreate his body so they could travel it with artifacts from his tomb. And so people would have a better idea of what the real person looked like in its current state in the tomb in Egypt.
And there's quite a few. I think it's come out a little more recently, and I don't know if we have any of the images here. There's now some images of what he probably looked like in real life. And it's funny because it's exactly what you're saying. It's a kid.
Yeah.
I say it's a kid, a young man, but it is not what I was taught in history class, because I went around for years thinking King Tut, you say it, was some gold dude. I mean, because that's all you ever saw.
Right.
So that was what was stuck in your head. So, how many is there more in that area? Is there more preserved things that we can learn from out there? I know they're being really careful with it, but
they're continually finding new things all the time, and the entrances are obscured. They're rightly so, because they get plundered very easily. And so Howard Carter in the 1920s, found Tutankhamen's tomb, and then kind of had a really good press rollout for it. Like he had a bunch of people lined up to look at it as they opened it, and then it was just stacked with, because it had not been plundered and looted. It was just absolutely packed with beautiful things. But that's the history of Egypt, things tend to get looted pretty easily. There's a lot of money in those artifacts.
Yeah, if you want to talk about the looting of a grave, go talk to Geraldo when he opened up that vault. That was a real winner. Let's go back a little bit in history, and we were talking about the things that happened on the very ground that we walk every day. So we'll talk right around here. And one of the things you said that I thought was really interesting, we talked about how if you look at a map, the continents all fit together. And
it's a supercontinent.
Yeah, there's a supercontinent, but there's also an ocean aspect to it that a lot of people don't realize right here.
Yeah, there's if you see exposed rocks in a road cut here in Missouri, especially around the Kearney area, if it's safe to do so, go. And if you walk and take a really close look at those rocks, they're absolutely filled with marine fossils. And you can find these things called brachiopods. There's these other a lot of people are very familiar with seeing these little, very circular, kind of whitish in color, that look almost like a sweet tart kind of, but they're smaller. And they're called crinoids, and they're part of a group of animals, sea animals, that are still alive today, but they're found in the thousands and thousands in these road cuts.
And what history-wise, how long ago are we looking?
So that's Mississippian in age. It's over a couple hundred million years old. So very, very ancient. And the entire state of Missouri at that time was covered in ocean.
So if you were to go look at a road cut, and normally in a road cut you can see like different layers, especially if some of it's more pronounced than others, but you can see the different layers. Is there a way to tell what period we're looking at by the layer, how far down we're going?
The best way to do that, if you're going into a place and you've never been there before, the best way to do that is just to use all the U.S. Geological Survey maps, because the United States has been extensively surveyed, and primarily by petroleum companies, because they're always interested in where oil is. So they very precisely grid out the layers and times and ages of rock. And so if you refer those, now there's a bunch of apps you can do it with. You can literally take your phone, drive to a roadside, plug in, it'll just tell you what layer you're probably most likely looking at. That's the easiest way now. It's just gotten a lot easier. But there are, as we had talked about earlier, this sort of erosional, depositional stuff. So, a lot of that stuff that you're seeing on the sides of the roads in Missouri is stuff that's been laid down over time in the bottom of an ocean. The stuff that sits on top of it, our farmland, is stuff that's been deposited. It's ice age deposition. So we have a weird sandwich of stuff. And so the stuff that's in between, there's a lot of time missing. And that stuff has been eroded out. And so there's a whether exposures exist, geology gets really complicated really fast, given how plates shift and whether it's been eroded out, and then you go to this place and that's exposed over there, but it's not over here. You can just go across a road sometimes and have a different time. So it can be very complicated. I'm an artist first. Not a geologist.
I understand why.
Because I have to be able to have I have to have that conversation with scientists. I have to be able to understand the vernacular, but I don't dive in super, super deep because I'm more worried about anatomy and things like that. Yeah.
Well, let's go back full circle. Let's look at some of the work that you've done, because it's absolutely fascinating. And if they want to, there's a website. What's the website they can go to look at? Because you've got some videos on there too.
I do. StaabStudios.com. And you can check out that. And there's a bunch of images of work. And then there's a number of kind of making of videos. In specific, there's this big megalodon that we created for the Smithsonian. There's a great video of the process of building that, which is getting a 52-foot long shark through a 8-foot tall door is always a bit of a challenge. So that's part of the thing you don't really ever think about as you you take on a project. Well, we have to think about it. That's my job, is to think about how to get big animals through small doors. But that's one of the things that's featured in that video.
So let's look at. Well, Brian's got a shot up there. That looks like a shark to me. Where's that at?
That's the same. That's the megalodon.
The same one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's rather large. Is that Brian in the picture down there below? No, not you. Pull up some of the dinosaur. Well, there's a good one.
Yeah, that's a local, believe it or not. That animal was found in Kansas.
Could you imagine going out and walking into that? Honey, I'm going to the store. No, I'm not.
Yeah, it's a really interesting animal. And I did that for that sculpture for the Sternberg Museum in Hayes, Kansas.
And what is that?
It's an animal called a pliosaur. So it's a short neck plesiosaur, which doesn't mean much to anybody. But the skull is absolutely exquisite. It's beautifully preserved. So down to the individual enamel serration or structure of the enamel on the teeth. Beautiful.
That where is that now?
That one's at the Sternberg Museum.
Okay.
In Hayes.
So what are you doing there? I'm guessing you're not petting it.
No, just moving it.
Okay.
Yeah, moving it just to the side a little bit.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah, one of our big tricks is trying to make sure you can safely, move these big sculptures, because, if you're moving a mammoth, even though it might have its structure in foam, there's steel in there, and they can still kill you.
So in real life, if you were to pet it like that, would it probably not?
No,
it wouldn't work out well for you.
Probably not.
No.
So speaking of moving stuff, tell us about this. Is there a story behind this one?
That is just outside of Kearney. That is the life-size Brachiosaurus that we made for the Indianapolis Children's Museum.
It looks like he's about ready to get hooked on a power line there.
Yeah, that's a crane. And so we set up, my neighbors I'm high entertainment for my neighbors.
Yeah.
I told you I want one of those for my backyard.
And sometimes it's kind of hard to hide what we're doing,
right,
because you can see it from the road. But this particular one is a 75-foot long dinosaur we made, and the requirement was that the design is that it's lifting the roof off of the museum, so it has to go through glass, and the roof is bent around the neck of the animal as well.
Oh.
So it had to had to get there, and one of the things I never ever considered as I entered into this profession was trying to figure out how to route large sculptures around overpasses.
That was going to be my next question, because I'm assuming you didn't put that on a UPS box and ship it over. How does one? I assume it comes apart, and then you have to design it to put it back together.
Right.
But freight? I mean, do you put it on a train, or how do you?
You just do a dedicated. Sometimes the sculptures are so large. That one was so large we had to put it on a lowboy, which is designed for heavy equipment, so it could get under the overpasses. It was very close to the top of the overpasses. So that, or they have to take, if you can't meet that requirement, then you have to drive every overpass on the outside, which is not a fun way to travel.
Can you imagine if you got in a wreck and then someone had to put that on their insurance claim? I had a dinosaur.
I turn a lot of heads when I drive.
I'm thinking so. Pull up a couple more of those, Brian, from the that we had on that. There was a grid that had like several of the images.
That's a neat one.
Oh, from the website?
Well, but what is that?
This has a very difficult name. It's called Quetzalcoatlus northropi.
I'm going to write that down. Is that common spelling on that?
Yes.
So it's named after a serpent. It's it's an Aztec serpent king. Wow. And it's from Texas. It's one of the largest, or it's the largest animal that ever flew. So it has a 30-foot wingspan, and that's the shop in Kearney. So,
wow.
So that's one of the questions. So see how you've got on the beak of it, it's blue. how do you know that?
We don't. There's some things that we can guess. There are some colors preserved in some fossils, but it's very, very rare. And for these animals in particular, we don't have any color preservation. But what we do is you look at living animals to try and make them as believable as possible. Makes sense. Yep.
And we know that those things didn't really I find it interesting that the things like that in the past, they didn't really have feathers, where our birds today. If you saw a bird flying around today with no feathers, other than a bat, and even a bat, people freak out. Mm-hmm. So imagine seeing something that big tootling around.
Yeah, that's a really large animal. It has sort of a very hair-like covering on it. It's not a true feather. Yep.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate you coming by today. Give us your website one more time, because I know there's a lot of people that want to go look at your stuff.
Sure. It's staabstudios.com.
And it's STAAB.
Correct.
Studios.com. And do not go try to find the place where they build these, because they don't give tours. And but I'm going out there. No, I'm just kidding. Thanks for coming by. I'm going to spend some time here when we get done looking at the videos and that sort of thing. Be sure to join us next week when our guest is Jeff Streeter, it looks like, from the Veterans Camping Initiative, and Mike Dickerson, no relation to me, with KC Hope Givers. And Mike Davis should be back for that. I believe I'm here as well. Brian will have to tell me what my schedule is, because he handles all my bookings. Thanks for joining us on Kearney Live. If you want to go look at if you were listening on the radio today and could not see the images, you can either visit the website Staab Studios, or you can go watch the replay of today's show on 1027KearneyMo.com or on any of the podcasts. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.